Imagine waking up every morning knowing that your job might kill you. Not someday in the distant future, but today. For millions of people throughout history, earning money was not simply about working hard. It was about surviving the day. Long before office jobs, modern safety rules, and labor laws, people worked in environments that were dangerous, exhausting, and sometimes horrifying. Children crawled deep into coal mines where adults could not fit. Divers plunged into dark oceans with nothing but a rope and a single breath of air. Workers climbed hundreds of feet into smokestacks filled with toxic soot. Others spent their lives knee-deep in human waste, cleaning the filth of entire cities. These were not rare or unusual occupations. They were ordinary jobs, jobs that families depended on to survive. Tonight, we explore some of the hardest and most dangerous ways people earned money in the past. Chapter 1. Dangerous work beneath the ocean. While miners faced dangers underground, another group of workers risked their lives deep beneath the ocean. For centuries, pearl divers searched the seabed for oysters that might contain valuable pearls. These pearls were prized for their beauty and rarity, but obtaining them required incredible courage and endurance. Before modern diving equipment existed, divers relied only on their lungs. They would tie heavy stones to their bodies to sink quickly into the water. Once they reached the ocean floor, they hurried to gather oysters into small nets. But time was limited. Every second underwater consumed precious oxygen. If a diver stayed too long, the body's desperate need for air could cause panic or unconsciousness. Returning to the surface too quickly also carried risks. The sudden change in pressure could damage the body in painful ways. Divers repeated these dangerous dives dozens of times each day. The work demanded incredible physical strength. Many divers suffered long-term injuries to their ears and lungs. Some never resurfaced at all. Yet pearl diving remained an important source of income for coastal communities around the world. Entire families depended on the success of these dangerous underwater journeys. Chapter 2. Children in the chimneys. One of the most disturbing jobs in history was chimney sweeping. In large cities during the 18th and 19th centuries, chimneys needed regular cleaning to prevent dangerous fires. But the narrow passages inside chimneys were too small for most adults. So employers hired children. Young boys, sometimes only 6 or 7 years old, were sent inside these dark vertical tunnels. Covered in soot, they climbed upward using their hands and feet to brace against the walls. The soot filled the air and coated their skin. Breathing became difficult inside the tight space. Some children became stuck halfway up the chimney. Others fell or suffocated. Even those who survived faced long-term health problems caused by constant exposure to soot. Despite these dangers, chimney sweeping became a common job for poor children. Their small bodies made them useful for work that adults could not perform. And families struggling with poverty often had little choice but to send their children into these hazardous occupations. Chapter 3. The world before easy work. To understand how hard work used to be, we first need to understand the world people lived in centuries ago. Today, many jobs rely on technology. Machines lift heavy loads, computers process information, and electricity powers tools that make work faster and safer. But in the past, none of these conveniences existed. Almost everything people needed had to be produced through physical labor. Buildings were constructed with hand tools. Food was grown and harvested manually. Transportation relied on human or animal strength. And nearly every product people used required someone to perform hours of exhausting work. The average person did not work 8 hours a day. Many people worked from sunrise until sunset. Farmers plowed fields under the burning sun. Blacksmiths hammered metal beside blazing furnaces. Builders carried heavy stones to construct walls, bridges, and castles. Life was physically demanding for nearly everyone. But while many jobs were difficult, some were far more brutal than others. Certain workers faced extreme danger every single day, and many of them accepted these risks because they had no alternative. Poverty forced people into jobs that could destroy their bodies or even end their lives. These were the occupations that society depended on but rarely appreciated. Jobs so difficult that modern workers can hardly imagine doing them. Chapter 4. The darkness of coal mining. Few jobs in history were as dangerous as coal mining. Coal powered the industrial world. It heated homes, fueled factories, and drove the steam engines that transformed transportation. But extracting coal from deep underground was incredibly risky. Miners worked in tunnels carved into the earth, sometimes hundreds of feet below the surface. These tunnels were often narrow, damp, and poorly ventilated. The air was filled with coal dust. With every breath, workers inhaled tiny particles that slowly damaged their lungs. Over time, many miners developed a condition known as black lung disease. This illness made breathing difficult and painful. For many workers, it eventually became fatal. But disease was only one of many dangers. The underground tunnels could collapse without warning. Supporting beams sometimes failed, causing tons of rock and soil to crash down on workers. Explosions were another terrifying risk. Coal dust suspended in the air could ignite from a spark, triggering massive blasts that traveled through tunnels like firestorms. Chapter 5. The dirtiest job in medieval cities. Life in medieval cities created another unpleasant problem. Human waste accumulated quickly in crowded neighborhoods. Without modern sewage systems, waste was often stored in pits beneath buildings. Eventually, these pits needed to be emptied. The workers responsible for this job were called gong farmers. Their work took place at night. Using buckets and shovels, they climbed into waste pits to remove the accumulated filth. The smell was overwhelming. The environment was filthy, and the work was extremely dangerous. Toxic gases sometimes formed inside the pits. Workers could lose consciousness if they inhaled too much. Despite the risks, gong farmers played an essential role in keeping cities functional. Without them, waste would quickly overflow into streets and homes. Their work was unpleasant, but it was necessary. And although society often looked down on these workers, their efforts helped maintain basic sanitation in crowded urban environments. Chapter 6. The brutal life of loggers. Deep inside vast forests, long before modern machinery existed, loggers performed one of the most physically exhausting jobs in history. These men spent months living in remote wilderness areas, far away from towns and cities. Their task was simple in theory, but incredibly difficult in practice. Cut down massive trees and transport the wood to growing cities. Using heavy axes and long two-man saws, loggers worked for hours chopping into enormous tree trunks. Every swing of the axe demanded strength and endurance. The sound of metal striking would echo across the forest as men worked together to bring down towering trees that had stood for centuries. But cutting the tree was only the beginning. When a tree finally fell, it crashed to the ground with enormous force. If a logger misjudged the direction of the fall, the tree could crush him instantly. Afterward, workers had to strip branches, cut the trunk into large logs, and drag the heavy wood across rough terrain. Transporting these logs was even more dangerous. In winter, loggers often used frozen rivers to move timber. Huge logs were rolled across icy surfaces or floated downstream once the ice melted. Workers walked on top of these moving logs, guiding them through narrow river channels. One wrong step could send a man into freezing water filled with heavy timber. If he became trapped between logs, survival was almost impossible. Logging camps were harsh places. Workers lived in simple wooden cabins and endured cold winters, long hours, and constant physical strain. Yet the demand for wood kept growing. Cities needed timber for buildings, ships, railroads, and fuel. And so the loggers returned to the forest again and again, risking their lives to harvest the trees that helped build the modern world. Chapter 7. Sailors on the most dangerous seas. For centuries, the oceans offered opportunity for those willing to take enormous risks. Sailors worked aboard wooden ships that crossed vast and unpredictable seas. These journeys could last weeks or even months, and the dangers were constant. Storms were one of the greatest threats. Powerful winds could snap masts, tear sails apart, and toss ships violently across towering waves. During these storms, sailors climbed high into the rigging to secure ropes and sails while the ship rocked beneath them. A single slip could send a sailor plunging into the ocean below, and falling into the sea during a storm almost always meant death. Disease was another serious danger. Ships were crowded, and fresh food was limited. Sailors often survived on salted meat and dry biscuits that lasted for long voyages. Without fresh fruits and vegetables, many sailors developed scurvy, a disease caused by vitamin deficiency. It weakened the body and caused severe illness. Water supplies also became contaminated during long journeys. In some cases, sailors drank spoiled water simply because no alternative existed. Pirates and enemy ships added another layer of danger. Naval battles could erupt suddenly, forcing sailors into violent combat. Despite these hardships, thousands of men chose life at sea. The promise of adventure, trade profits, and steady wages attracted workers who were willing to face the dangers of the open ocean. Their journeys connected continents and shaped global trade. But for many sailors, every voyage carried the risk that they might never return home. Chapter 8. Factory Workers of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution transformed the world. New factories appeared across Europe and America, producing textiles, machinery, and countless goods at unprecedented speed. But inside these factories, working conditions were extremely harsh. Workers often labored for 12 to 16 hours a day in loud, crowded buildings filled with dangerous machines. The air was thick with dust and smoke. Large spinning machines operated constantly, powered by steam engines. These machines had moving parts that could easily catch loose clothing or hair. Accidents were common. Workers sometimes lost fingers, hands, or even their lives while operating machinery. The situation was even worse for children. Factory owners often hired children because they could be paid less and could fit into tight spaces between machines. Young workers cleaned equipment while it was still running. If they moved too slowly or made a mistake, the consequences could be devastating. Despite the risks, millions of workers filled factory jobs during the industrial age. For many families, factory work offered the only reliable source of income. Their labor fueled the rapid growth of industry that reshaped entire societies. But the cost of that progress was measured in long hours, dangerous conditions, and countless exhausted workers. Chapter 9. Ice Harvesters in Freezing Winters. Before the invention of refrigerators and freezers, ice itself was an important product. During the 18th and 19th centuries, workers harvested large blocks of ice from frozen lakes and rivers during winter. This job required strength, endurance, and the ability to withstand extreme cold. Ice harvesters used long saws to cut deep lines into thick sheets of frozen water. Once the ice blocks were separated, workers pushed them toward shore using long poles. Each block of ice could weigh hundreds of kilograms. Moving them across slippery surfaces was exhausting and dangerous. If a worker slipped and fell into the freezing water, survival became a race against time. Hypothermia could set in within minutes. Despite these risks, ice harvesting was a vital industry. The ice collected during winter was stored in insulated warehouses and transported to cities during warmer months. It preserved food, cooled drinks, and supported industries that depended on refrigeration. This difficult winter labor allowed people to enjoy ice long before electric refrigerators existed. Bye, we will meet again.